An old forester delivered a strange girl in the woods. He was shocked to see what she had given birth to. Mr. Davis carried his love for the forest and the taiga nature throughout his life. Since the very first day when his father took him to the taiga, showing him its greatness and power. At that time, everything seemed so fabulous and beautiful to the little boy that everything he saw took his breath away. Even after several years, the feeling had not disappeared. He knew almost everything about the forest. He knew where and what kind of wood grows and how to breed it. Mr. Davis had order in everything, in the house and on the land. He lived with his granddaughter on the outskirts of the village in a small house with windows overlooking the edge of the forest. Gloria was an orphan. Her grandfather was the only family she had. Her parents were geologists and had been killed in a mountain slide while setting up camp in a ravine. A huge avalanche of snow and ice buried them under it. Mr. Davis, when it happened, did not know how to calm his heartache, unable to find room for grief. Gloria was 5 years old at the time, and she was visiting her grandparents on vacation. The news of the death of her son and daughter-in-law undermined the health of Mr. Davis's wife, who even before the incident had not been distinguished by excellent health. After the tragedy, she lived another 3 years and died from complications caused by heart disease. So it turned out that Mr. Davis brought up his granddaughter alone. Even though he was old, he did not give up, but made every effort to provide his granddaughter with everything she needed. Now it is easier for the old man. His granddaughter has grown up and can take care of herself. Gloria had her own amateur group at school, in which she put on various plays to the delight of all the village children. Mr. Davis worked as a forester in the forestry administration and often had to visit the district center. From such trips, he always brought a small present to his granddaughter, a down scarf or an unusual brooch, and sometimes just a muffin. "Grandpa, are you going to the district today?" Gloria asked, looking Mr. Davis in the eyes. "I will, my dear. The report must be submitted to the department. After these fires, the authorities need data on the damage. They want to assess the scale of the fire," said Mr. Davis with a sad sigh. "I have a favor to ask of you, Grandpa. Please bring me some colored pencils, mascara, and glitter. We'll prepare a number for the holiday, dedicated to the first day of summer," said Gloria, looking at the old man pleadingly. "All right, darling. How can I refuse you? Such a beautiful and clever girl," the old man replied with a smile. Before leaving for town, Mr. Davis stopped by his neighbor Miss Miller, a local healer. They had known each other for a long time, being old residents of the village. They helped each other in a neighborly way as much as they could, and they held on to each other, understanding how hard it was for the old people. "Miss Miller, I'm going to town. Can I bring you anything?" Mr. Davis asked. "Yes, I seem to have enough of everything." "Actually, could you bring me some yarn?" asked Miss Miller. "I will by all means bring it," the forester answered readily. He quickly solved his business at the forestry department. After reviewing the report, the inspector asked for data from the remote cordon where Mr. Davis did not visit for a long time due to lack of free time. Having promised to fill the gap in the report, the forester went home, having previously bought everything from the list of ordered items. His granddaughter and Miss Miller were very happy with the gifts, thanking the old man profusely. And the next day, he went early in the morning to the far cordon. He took an axe with him, and, as was his habit, he made notches on trees, marking the path for travelers and hunters. The trail meandered between huge pines and sprawling firs. The remote cordon was notorious for its wilderness and swampy terrain, where one could easily come across a wild boar or a lynx. The forester was a good judge of footprints, automatically noting this or that print left by a wild animal. Suddenly, on the damp moss-covered soil, he saw a human footprint. The footprint was small, as if it belonged to a child. But, looking closer, Mr. Davis came to the conclusion that a woman's foot had left it. Who could it be in such a wilderness? The forester thought anxiously. Mr. Davis decided to follow the strange trail and find out who it belonged to. After walking 10 meters along it, he heard crying somewhere in the vicinity. Cautiously bypassing the dangerous mire, the forester moved on and behind the nearest willow tree saw a girl standing waist deep in the black mud. The unfortunate girl had grabbed a branch, thus trying not to fall into the mire. Tears were streaming from her eyes, and she smeared them over her muddy face. "How did you get there, sweetheart? Oh, don't you move. I'll think of something," said the forester, knowing that in the swamp the main thing is to stand still and not to wander. Because the more you try to get out, the more you get sucked in. Mr. Davis bent a young alder tree so that the girl could grasp its branches. She deftly grasped them, and the forester at the same time pulled the tree toward him. Slowly, centimeter by centimeter, the old man managed to pull the weeping stranger out of the mire. Panting on the saving hard surface, the forester was surprised to see that the girl was pregnant. "My dear, where are you from? Why did you crawl into the swamp?" "Don't be afraid of me," cautiously voiced Mr. Davis. "I'm Aunt Harris. You probably don't remember me, Mr. Davis. I'm from the next village. Your Gloria and I were classmates. I went to town to study 3 years ago, and now," the girl sobbed, clutching her stomach. "What a mess! Why did you come to the swamp?" the forester asked as cautiously as possible. "My father saw that I was pregnant and chased me out of the house. I wanted to drown myself. Who needs me now?" Anne cried out through her tears. "Honey, don't get excited, please. I'll help your grief. Don't doubt it. I'll also not leave you in trouble. I've got a winter hut at the camp. You'll live there for the time being, and then we'll see. You have nothing to wonder about the swamps," Mr. Davis reassured the girl. Taking Anne by the hand, he escorted her to the hut. "How far along are you?" the forester asked, looking at the large belly of the girl. "I'm very far along. I'm due to give birth any day now, I'm afraid," Anne answered fearfully. "Well, I'll talk to Miss Miller. You won't find a better midwife around here," said Mr. Davis confidently. Leaving Anne some food from his supplies, the forester went home. The first thing he did was to visit Miss Miller. Miss Miller was sympathetic to the old man's request. "Well, if that's the case, let's help the poor girl. She'll give birth, and then I'll talk to her father. I'll have to visit her tomorrow." "Thank you, Miss Miller. God bless you." Mr. Davis thanked his neighbor heartily. When she came to see Anne the next day, she found her in tears. The girl was going into labor, and she was afraid she was going to have to give birth alone. "Well, Mr. Davis, heat some water and bring some clean towels," Miss Miller ordered, deftly putting Anne on the bed. The forester did everything and went out the door. After a couple of hours, the door of the hut opened, and an excited Miss Miller appeared on the threshold, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Well, Mr. Davis, I had many women in labor, but it was the first time I was met with such a woman. She gave birth to a girl, thank God." "What happened, Miss Miller?" the old man asked in surprise. "Go and see for yourself," Miss Miller answered. When the forester entered the house, he was dumbfounded. Wrapped in swaddling clothes, a dark-skinned girl was lying beside Anne. Her skin was not too dark. It was more like swarthy. "How wondrous are your Lord's deeds!" Mr. Davis took his head. The girl was born healthy, with a good appetite. Anne named the baby Monica. Watching her take care of the baby, The Forrester and Miss Miller felt a rush of affection for the girl and the baby. All was well. 3 days passed. Mr. Davis and Miss Miller visited the woman in labor every morning, bringing food and warm clothes. And on the 4th day, they saw that the bed was empty and Anne was gone, and only baby Monica was lying on the bed, crying. Where had she gone? You good-for-nothing mother! Abandoning her daughter? The Forrester asked anxiously. Having searched all possible places, Miss Miller and Mr. Davis found Anne at her parents'. The girl's father, Albert Harris, opened the gate for them. I respect you, Mr. Davis, of course, for helping your daughter. But I won't take the baby, and if you force her on us, I'll give her to an orphanage. They will laugh in the village, the hunter answered resolutely and went away into the house, slamming the door loudly. What are you doing, Albert? She is your granddaughter, after all. Go away, Mr. Davis. By God, I cannot see her any more, the hunter grumbled angrily through the door. The Forrester returned home with the girl in his arms. Gloria had heard what had happened. Granddaughter, what shall we do? I do not have the hand to give Monica in the orphanage, the old man said mournfully. Grandpa, why don't we adopt the little girl? Anne is no stranger to me, a friend after all. I understand her, afraid of her father. And now this girl must suffer because of it? Gloria suggested. Mr. Davis gladly agreed. He was inwardly ready for this. He just lacked a push, and his granddaughter pushed him to make an important decision. So Monica began to live in the Forrester's family. Gloria was very fond of the girl and took her as her own. The color of her skin made no difference to her. They fed the baby with milk formula and semolina porridge. Monica was a sweet and obedient baby. As the girl grew older, she became like a little princess. Gloria paid a lot of attention to the girl, working with her in her school theater. But not everyone in the village accepted the mulatto girl with warmth and love. And while the little girl was still young and spent most of her time at home, it did not go beyond gossip. But when Monica went to school, that's when the main problems in her life began. Mom, no one wants to sit at the same desk with me at school. They say I'm dirty and need to be washed. Crying, she complained to her foster mother. And they also say that I'm good for stealing the neighbor's apples. I can't be seen at night, sobbing, the daughter continued. Don't listen to them, daughter. Their mouths are dirty. It would do them no harm to wash their own tongues with soap and water, replied Gloria, knowing that children simply retell the overheard conversations of their parents, absorbing negative information like a sponge. But the older Monica grew, the situation only worsened. In the village, people began to look at Gloria and Mr. Davis askew, as if reproaching them for something. Often black puppies or kittens were thrown into the Forrester's yard to emphasize their status as lovers of dark colors. And once, they even poured tar over the gate. Village gossip girls whispered behind Gloria's back, exchanging meaningful glances. Look, here she comes. She took in a foundling, and she's glad. Normal people rejected her, and these people pick her up. Monica had a very hard time in her school years. Sometimes when she came home from school, she would lock herself in her room and sob silently. One day, Gloria put on a school drama club play, where Monica was assigned one of the main roles. Just before the premiere of the play, the director of the club called Gloria. Gloria, why do you have one of the main roles being played by this girl? What do you mean? Are we on the African continent or what? Tomorrow there will be all sorts of rumors. There will be an article in the paper, and your Monica will be on the front page. They'll make fun of us. I put Monica in the theater group not because she is my daughter, but because she has very good vocal skills, you know? Agitatedly replied Gloria. Yes, let her be an opera singer. I do not care. But I will not tolerate her in the play, the director said firmly, making it clear that the conversation was over. So Gloria had to take Monica out of the play. Mr. Davis was very indignant about it, but he couldn't change it. Monica's own mother, Anne, never visited her daughter during the whole time, having cut her out of her life. Anne often thought about life in the big city and studying at a prestigious university. She never told her family about her relationship with a student from a small African country, although the romance, which spun in the third year, was very stormy. The passionate Southerner showered Anne with flowers and gifts. It seemed like everything was going to go well for the couple. But everything did not go as they'd hoped. They parted quite routinely. One day the guy left for his homeland. The result of the relationship was the birth of a daughter no one in the village wanted to acknowledge. Time passed, and Monica finished school. Despite all the mockery and prejudiced teachers, she got straight A's in all subjects. Every day, practicing her singing, she learned to sing very well. Monica had no doubts about her choice of profession. She wanted the stage and nothing else. Daughter, why don't you stay? Who knows what the big city has in store for you? Gloria asked hopefully, who was afraid to let her daughter go alone. No, Mom, I'm going to take ballet classes. Anyway, they won't let me live here. They'll drive me to hell for my origin. But they don't take it badly in the city, Monica answered with confidence. Mr. Davis and Gloria gave the girl the money they were saving from their pensions and wages. She immediately enrolled at the ballet school and impressed the teachers with her voice and artistry. Apparently, her lessons in the school drama club were not wasted. She became a star in her class at once. No one believed that a girl from the village could sing so well. Monica was happy that none of the students cared about her background. Having graduated from the college, the goal
This story is titled, My Fiancé Cheated at Her Bachelorette Party, so I left her without saying a single word. I don't know how to explain all of this. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hey Reddit, never imagined I'd be posting something like this, but I just need to get this off my chest. Let me give you some background before I dig into the real drama. Mia and I, both 30, met when we were 24. We were both at a mutual friend's birthday party. I remember seeing her across the room, laughing at something someone said, and thinking she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She had this infectious energy, the kind that made you want to be around her. By the end of the night, we were sitting on the patio talking about everything. Music, movies, travel dreams, and I was hooked. We started dating a few weeks later and moved in together after a year. Things were great, or at least I thought they were. Sure, Mia liked to party more than I did, but it was never anything extreme, or so I believed. I figured we balanced each other out. I was the grounded one, and she brought the fun. When I proposed last year, I was sure I'd found my forever person. She cried when I asked her, and her answer was an immediate yes. We spent months planning the wedding together, picking out venues, tasting cakes, and arguing about whether to do an open bar. I thought we were building a life together, but apparently, I was wrong. The drama started with a package. A damn package of all things. I wasn't even supposed to be home at that time. My shift ended early, and I figured I'd surprise Mia by coming home and cooking dinner. When I got to the apartment, I saw a small gift bag sitting at the door. It had a glittery tag on it that read, "To the wildest bride-to-be, you deserved every second of it. Love, Tasha." At first, I didn't think much of it. Tasha was Mia's best friend, practically glued to her side since college. I always thought she was a bit over the top, loud, dramatic, and the kind of person who thrived on chaos, but I tolerated her for Mia's sake. They were the fun duo, or at least that's how Mia always described them. Still, something about that note gave me a weird feeling. I brought the bag inside and set it on the kitchen counter, staring at it for a good 5 minutes. My brain kept going back and forth. It's probably nothing, but why does it feel weird? I decided to open it. I told myself it wasn't snooping. It was just curiosity. Besides, it was addressed to Mia, but left out in the open like that. Basically, an invitation, right? Inside, there were the typical bachelorette party things: a cheap plastic tiara, a bride's last ride sash, and some glittery confetti that spilled everywhere. But then, at the bottom of the bag, there was a pair of men's boxers, used, not freshly laundered. My stomach turned, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's a gag gift, some kind of stupid joke. Then I saw the flash drive. I don't even know what possessed me to check what was on it. I guess I was already uneasy from the boxers, and something about the way the bag screamed "Wild Night" wasn't sitting right with me. I plugged it into my laptop and opened the only file on it. The video started off innocently enough. Mia and her friends were sitting in a booth at some club, laughing and cheering. The camera wobbled as it zoomed in on Mia, wearing the tiara and sash. She looked gorgeous, as always, but there was something off about her energy. She wasn't just celebrating, she was on another level, like she didn't have a care in the world. The next clip was where things started to go downhill. Mia was on a stage at what was clearly a strip club, grinding on a male stripper while her friends whooped and hollered. At first, I thought, okay, it's a bachelorette party. Not great, but not the end of the world. But then the camera followed her as she pulled the stripper off stage, giggling and leading him toward a private room. I paused the video. My heart was racing. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe it was just for show, right? Maybe she went in there, had a laugh and walked out. But I knew better. Deep down, I already knew. The next clip removed all doubt. It showed Mia sitting in a lounge area, surrounded by 3 guys. They were laughing, drinking, and flirting. But it didn't stop there. One of them leaned in and kissed her. And she didn't just let him, she kissed him back. Then another guy joined in. By the end of the video, she was leading all 3 of them into what looked like a hotel room. Tasha's voice in the background made it worse. She was laughing and narrating the whole thing. "Mia, you're a legend. Bride of the year." I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my chest had been ripped open. This wasn't the woman I'd spent the last 6 years of my life with. This wasn't the Mia who used to fall asleep on my chest while we watched stupid rom-coms. This wasn't the Mia who talked about how excited she was to start a family with me. Mia came home that evening like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and went on about how Tasha had the best ideas for wedding decorations. I just nodded and smiled, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was done. I couldn't even look at her without seeing that video in my head. I felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Had there been signs? Did I miss them? Or was this the first time? I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care. The woman I thought I was marrying didn't exist anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the video over and over in my mind. Every laugh, every kiss, every touch felt like a dagger. I wanted to confront her, to yell, to demand answers. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. The next morning, Mia got up early to get ready for work. She kissed me on the forehead before leaving and said, "I can't wait to see you tonight, babe." I smiled and said, "Me too." The second Mia left for work, I started moving. I didn't even sit down to have coffee or think about what I was doing. I just grabbed my duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, chargers, whatever I could fit without making a mess. I wasn't planning to come back, so I didn't waste time trying to decide what to take or leave. I knew the furniture wasn't worth the hassle, and I didn't care about most of the shared stuff anyway. Let her keep the couch, the TV, the kitchen gadgets. She could have it all. I just wanted out. As I was packing, I realized I'd never done anything like this before. I've always been the guy who plans everything to the last detail. Vacations, work schedules, even lazy Sundays. But here I was, stuffing random things into a bag with no clear plan other than get out of this shit. I grabbed my phone and started Googling places to stay. I didn't want to go to a regular hotel. It felt too cold, too close to reality. I needed somewhere I could think, breathe, and figure out my next move. That's when I found a small resort about 2 hours outside the city. It wasn't fancy, but it looked quiet, and they had last-minute availability. Perfect. I called and booked a room for a week, paid up front, and didn't even care about the price. It felt like a small price to pay for some peace of mind. Before I left, I grabbed a folder from my desk where I kept all the wedding contracts. I had no intention of paying for a wedding that wasn't going to happen. The venue was first on my list, so I called them as I walked out the door. "Hi, this is Ryan," I said, trying to sound normal. "I need to cancel a reservation for a wedding." The woman on the other end sounded surprised. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Can I ask why?" I wasn't about to spill my personal drama to a stranger, so I just said, "Change of plans. Life happens, you know?" She went on about cancellation fees, how they'd keep 20% of the deposit, blah blah. I didn't care. "That's fine," I said. Just cancel it. With that done, I got in my car and started driving. I didn't even look back at the apartment. The drive to the resort felt surreal. It was like I was on autopilot, just following the GPS while my mind replayed everything I'd seen on that flash drive. Was it just the party? Or had she been hiding this side of herself the whole time we were together? I stopped at a gas station halfway there to grab some snacks and water. While I was paying, my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I didn't even have to look to know it was Mia. I ignored it, but the buzzing didn't stop. Text after text, call after call. She must have gotten home and realized I was gone. I couldn't bring myself to read the messages yet. I wasn't ready for the excuses, the fake tears, or the "it wasn't what it looked like" speech. I just turned my phone on silent and kept driving. The place was small, but perfect. A king-sized bed, a little kitchenette, a fireplace, and a deck overlooking the lake. It felt like a world away from everything I'd left behind. I dumped my bags in the corner, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let out a long, shaky breath. For the first time all day, I felt the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just a fight or a breakup. I'd left behind my fiancé, my home, and the life I thought I was building. I spent the rest of the day unpacking, but it felt weird to see my stuff in this unfamiliar space. I kept expecting Mia to call out from the other room or ask me what I wanted for dinner. Every little sound made me jump, like she was going to walk in at any moment. When I finally sat down to eat a sandwich I'd made from the snacks I brought, I checked my phone. There were over 20 missed calls from Mia, plus a flood of texts. They started out casual. "Hey babe, where are you? Did you go somewhere without telling me? Let me know when you're coming back." Then they got panicked. "Ryan, this isn't funny. Where are you? Are you okay? Why is your stuff gone? What's going on?" And finally, desperate, "Please call me. I don't understand what's happening. Please." I didn't respond. Instead, I called my parents. My parents are the kind of people who don't pry unless they absolutely have to. When I told them I'd left Mia and the wedding was off, my mom just said, "Okay, sweetie, do you want to tell us what happened?" I kept it vague. "She wasn't who I thought she was," I said. My dad chimed in, "Good for you, son. Better to find out now than later." They didn't press me for details, which I appreciated. I told them I was staying at a resort for a bit to clear my head, and they said they'd support me no matter what. That first night at the cabin was strange. I kept expecting Mia to barge in, demand answers, or somehow convince me to come back. I thought about how much time and effort I'd put into our relationship, planning dates, saving for the wedding, compromising on things like her obsession with Tasha. And for what? For her to throw it all away in one night of partying? By the time I went to bed, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going back. Not for her tears, her apologies, or her promises. This was the end, and I was okay with that. One thing kept bothering me: Tasha. She wasn't just some innocent bystander in all this. If anything, she was the ringleader. That video wasn't just a candid recording of the night. It felt like a trophy, something she was proud to show off. And that damn note on the package? "You deserved every second of it." It was practically a confession. Tasha always rubbed me the wrong way. When Mia and I started dating, Tasha was one of the first people I met in her circle. She was loud, constantly making sarcastic jokes, and always had to be the center of attention. Mia thought she was hilarious and fun, but I thought she was obnoxious. Over the years, I learned to tolerate her because she and Mia were so close, but I never trusted her. Looking back, there were red flags. Tasha would constantly push Mia to go out even when we had plans. There were times when Mia came home drunk at 2 a.m., with Tasha giggling in the background, shouting, "Sorry for stealing your girl, Ryan." I used to laugh it off, but now it didn't feel so funny. At the resort, I decided to confront her. Not Mia. Not yet. I wanted answers from the person who encouraged this whole mess. I didn't want to call Tasha directly, so I used a burner number app to text her. Something vague but baiting. "Hey, it's Ryan. We need to talk about Mia. Meet me at the coffee shop on 7th tomorrow at noon." She responded within 5 minutes. "WTF? Are you okay? Is Mia okay? What's this about?" I didn't reply. The next day, I drove back to the city, parked a few blocks from the coffee shop, and waited. Sure enough, Tasha walked in right on time, looking as smug as ever. She was wearing her usual over-the-top outfit, a bright pink blazer, heels that looked impossible to walk in, and sunglasses indoors. Classic Tasha. I walked in a few minutes later and sat down across from her. She looked surprised to see me, but then smiled. "Ryan, you scared me with that text. What's going on?" I didn't waste any time. "Cut the crap, Tasha. I know about the bachelorette party." Her smile froze. What do you mean?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. "I mean the flash drive, the videos, the package you left on the doorstep. I know everything." She stared at me for a moment, then laughed nervously. Oh, come on, Ryan. It's just bachelorette party stuff. You're not seriously upset about that, are you? Upset? I said, leaning back in my chair. That's an understatement. What kind of best friend encourages someone to cheat on their fiancé and then sends them a highlight reel? Her face turned red. It wasn't like that, she said quickly. It was just a fun night. No harm, no foul. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the screenshots I'd saved. I slid it across the table, showing her the messages she'd sent Mia. Bride of the year? You owned that stage, girl? Don't feel guilty. It's your last chance to be free. Her eyes widened, and she tried to push the phone back toward me. Ryan, you're taking this way too seriously. It's just tradition, you know? Every bride deserves one wild night. Tradition, I said, my voice rising slightly. Is that what you call it? Because to me, it looks like you were egging her on the whole time. Tasha sighed and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Look, I didn't force her to do anything, okay? She's a grown woman. She made her own choices. And you were right there cheering her on, I shot back. You were supposed to have her back, Tasha. Instead, you helped her throw away everything we built together. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please. It's not like she doesn't love you. It was just a one-night thing. You guys can move past this. That set me off. I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. Move past this? You think I can just forget about her sleeping with 3 guys because you call it a one-night thing? You're unbelievable. She looked around nervously, probably worried about the other customers staring. Okay, fine, she said, lowering her voice. I'm sorry if it got out of hand. But honestly, Ryan, this is between you and Mia. Don't drag me into it. You're already in it, I said, standing up. And believe me, Tasha, everyone is going to know exactly what kind of friend you are. Her eyes widened. What does that mean? You'll find out soon enough, I said, grabbing my phone and walking out. On the way back to the resort, I thought about what she'd said. She's a grown woman. She made her own choices. As much as I wanted to blame Tasha for everything, she was right about one thing. Mia had made her own decisions. Tasha might have encouraged her, but Mia didn't have to go along with it. That thought made my stomach turn. I'd always seen Mia as this fun, carefree person, but now I realized she was just reckless. Tasha might have been the match, but Mia was the one who lit the fire. When I got back to the cabin, I started drafting an email. I wasn't ready to confront Mia yet, but I wanted to make sure Tasha couldn't spin the story in her favor. I attached the screenshots and videos to the email and sent it to a few of our mutual friends, just the ones I trusted to keep it quiet until I was ready to tell the full story. I didn't hear from Tasha after that meeting, but I wasn't surprised. She probably realized there was nothing she could say to make things right. And honestly, I didn't care. She wasn't my problem anymore. My next move was clear to me at the time. Reach out to Mia's parents and expose everything. To get things clear to you, Mia's family always had this old-school, conservative vibe that made me feel like I was constantly being judged. When we moved in together 3 years ago, her mom, Janet, acted like we were running some kind of underground scandal. She didn't outright say it, but the constant comments like, it's not proper to live together before marriage, and the way she always looked disappointed when I mentioned our apartment made her feelings pretty clear. Her dad, Henry, was quieter about it, but still disapproving. He'd grunt whenever the topic came up and say something like, back in my day, we did things differently. It wasn't until Mia and I got engaged that they even started warming up to me. Once there was a ring on her finger, suddenly Janet was planning bridal showers, and Henry was offering to help us with a down payment for a house. It was like I'd passed some invisible test, and now I was finally worthy. But after everything that happened, I couldn't keep the truth to myself. Mia had betrayed me, and now it was her turn to face the music, especially with her parents, who had been so smug about how perfect and proper she was. They have always supported her emotionally and financially, as they were Kina wealthy. At the time, Mia's texts and calls hadn't stopped since my conversation with Tasha. Ryan, please answer me. I know you're upset, but we need to talk. I love you. Please don't give up on us. Every message made me angry. She didn't get to play the victim. She made her choices. I hadn't responded to a single text or call, and I didn't plan to. But then Janet texted me. Ryan, what's going on? Mia is a wreck. Please call me. We're worried. I stared at the message for a while before deciding I needed to do this in person. If anyone was going to deal with Mia, it wasn't going to be me. Let her parents handle it. They always acted like they knew better anyway. The next day, I drove back into the city and headed straight to Janet and Henry's house. I didn't tell Mia I was going, even though I knew she'd probably lose it once she found out. When Janet opened the door, her face lit up with a mix of relief and concern. Oh, Ryan, thank God you're here. What's going on? Mia is so worried about you since yesterday. Henry was sitting in his usual chair in the living room, flipping through a newspaper. He looked up when he heard my voice. Ryan, he said, nodding. Glad you're here. Maybe you can tell us what's going on. I stepped inside and sat down on their pristine couch. I came to tell you the truth, I said, keeping my voice steady. You're going to want to sit down for this. Janet looked confused, but sat across from me, clutching her hands together. Henry leaned forward in his chair, his brows furrowed. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of evidence. Mia's been lying to you, I said, and to me. The wedding is off because of what she did at her bachelorette party. Janet gasped. What are you talking about? What could she have possibly done that's so bad? I handed her my phone. Watch this. She hesitated, looking between me and the screen. Then she hit play. Her expression shifted from confusion to horror as the video played. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice shaking. This can't be real. Tell me this isn't real. Henry stood up, his face red with anger. What's going on? Let me see that. Janet handed him the phone, tears streaming down her face. As Henry watched, his jaw clenched, and his hands gripped the edges of the phone so tightly I thought he might crush it. This is what she did, I said, my voice calm but firm. She didn't just betray me. She made a spectacle out of it, and her friends encouraged her the whole way. Janet buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I can't believe this. I can't believe she would do this. Henry paced the room, his fists clenched. That girl. That damn girl, he muttered. We raised her better than this. What the hell was she thinking? She wasn't thinking, I said. And now she's trying to get me to forgive her, but I'm done. I thought you both should know the truth because I'm not going to clean up her mess. Janet looked up at me, her eyes red. Ryan, please, can't you just talk to her? Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she was pressured. She wasn't pressured, I said, cutting her off. She made her choices, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering if she'll make them again. Henry stopped pacing and pointed at Janet. This is what happens when she listens to that damn Tasha instead of us. I told you Tasha was trouble. I told you. Janet nodded, wiping her tears. We should have said something. We should have stopped her from moving in with you. Maybe this wouldn't have happened. I almost laughed at the irony. You think me moving in with her was the problem? I asked. You've been so obsessed with what's proper that you never saw the real issue. Mia's reckless. She's been reckless for a long time, and now she's paying for it. Henry sat back down, shaking his head. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I stood up. Look, I'm sorry to drop this on you, but it's your problem now. She'll probably come to you for help, and you can decide how to handle it. I've already made my decision. Janet grabbed my arm as I walked toward the door. Ryan, please don't tell anyone else about this. Think of the embarrassment for our family. I pulled my arm away gently. That's not my concern anymore, Janet. You'll have to deal with that yourselves. As I drove back to the resort, I felt a strange sense of closure. For years, Mia's parents had looked down on me, treating me like I wasn't good enough for their daughter. Now they knew the truth. Their perfect daughter had ruined everything on her own. Later that evening, I got another voicemail from Janet. Ryan, it's Janet. I don't even know what to say. Henry and I are devastated. We confronted Mia and she's completely fallen apart. She said she doesn't know how to fix this, but honestly, neither do we. I just want you to know that we're so sorry. If you ever want to talk, we're here. I deleted the message. Mia could deal with her parents now. I was done. Let her explain herself to them. Let them pick up the pieces. I wasn't her safety net anymore. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. It didn't take long for the cracks to spread. After dropping the truth bomb on Mia's parents, I decided to widen the circle. I wasn't being vindictive. Okay, maybe a little. But people needed to know what Mia and her crew were really about. If I didn't say anything, they'd sweep it under the rug like it never happened. That wasn't going to fly. The first person I reached out to was Rachel, one of Mia's closest friends. She wasn't at the same level of chaos as Tasha, but she was there that night. She played along, cheered Mia on, and probably thought it was all harmless fun. I wasn't giving her a free pass. I sent her a short text. Rachel, I know what happened at the bachelorette party. I've got the videos and messages to prove it. Don't play dumb. We need to talk. Rachel called me within minutes. Her voice was shaky, like she was caught off guard. Ryan, what the hell is this? Where did you get this? Does it matter where I got it? I said, keeping my tone calm. You were there. You saw everything. She stammered for a bit before blurting out, I didn't know it was that bad, okay? I thought it was just some dancing and flirting. I didn't know. You didn't know she disappeared with 3 guys? I cut in. You didn't know she cheated on me in front of all of you? Rachel went quiet. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up, but then she sighed. Look, Ryan, I'm sorry. I should have said something, but it's not like I could stop her. Mia talked about how boring marrying you will be, and she wanted one last fun night. Tasha was the one hyping her up, and Mia was, well, she was drunk and going along with it. I almost laughed. Going along with it? That's your defense? She wasn't just going along with it, Rachel. She made those choices, sober or not, and you stood there and let her. Rachel tried to backtrack. I didn't think it was my place. It was your place, I snapped. You're her friend. A real friend would have stopped her. She didn't have much to say after that. By the end of the call, she apologized again and swore she'd talk to Mia. I wasn't holding my breath. The next domino to fall was Tasha. I didn't have to do much there because, by now, Mia's parents were in full damage control mode. Janet and Henry must have laid into Mia after I left their house because the next day, Mia called me over 20 times. I didn't answer a single one. Then Tasha texted me, and her tone was anything but friendly. Ryan, what the hell are you telling people? Mia's a mess, and now everyone's acting weird with me. You need to stop this. I couldn't help but smirk when I read that. Tasha was finally feeling the heat. I didn't even bother responding. Let her squirm. But the best part came when Rachel spilled the beans to the rest of their friend group. Rachel might have been complicit in Mia's behavior, but she wasn't about to go down with the ship. She started distancing herself from both Mia and Tasha, telling anyone who'd listen that she didn't know the full extent of what happened, and that she never would have supported it if she had. By the end of the week, the story was everywhere. Mia had gone from being the fun bride-to-be to the pariah of her own social circle. One of the mutual friends in their group, Chloe, reached out to me. We weren't particularly close, but she'd always been polite and respectful whenever we hung out in group settings. Her message caught me off guard. Hey Ryan, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything you're going through. I had no idea Mia was capable of something like that. If there's anything you need, let me know. Meanwhile, Mia was still trying to get in touch with me. The texts had slowed down, but they hadn't stopped entirely. Ryan, I know you're mad, but we need to talk. Please. I'll do anything to fix this. Just tell me what to do. It was almost pathetic. She wasn't apologizing because she felt bad about what she did. She was apologizing because her life was falling apart. Then, Tasha and Mia finally had their falling out. It started as a quiet disagreement, but quickly escalated into a full-blown argument. Tasha, fed up with being blamed for everything, told Mia, "Don't act like I made you do anything. You were all in. Stop playing the victim." Chloe heard about the fight and texted me. Tasha and Mia aren't speaking anymore. Tasha's telling everyone Mia used her as a scapegoat. It's a mess. I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction. For years, Tasha had acted like she was untouchable, manipulating people and causing drama. The last I heard from Janet, Mia was completely falling apart and struggling to get her life together. At first, I thought it was just emotional fallout, crying, begging, the usual. But as the days passed, I started hearing bits and pieces from mutual acquaintances about how bad things had really gotten for her. Apparently, Mia's parents, Janet and Henry, had reached their breaking point. After our conversation, I knew they were angry, but I didn't expect them to go as far as they did. From what I heard, Janet tried to talk some sense into Mia after I exposed everything. Mia's response? She blamed me. She said I overreacted, that I should have been more understanding, and that it wasn't fair for me to ruin her life over one mistake. That didn't sit well with Janet and Henry. They'd always been about appearances, and having their daughter's dirty laundry aired out to their friends and extended family was their worst nightmare. When they realized Mia wasn't taking responsibility for anything, they kicked her out of the house. It wasn't just a threat either. They packed up her stuff, left it on the porch, and told her not to come back until she figured out how to take accountability for her actions. Knowing Janet, she probably threw in something like, "You're an embarrassment to this family." Mia tried to stay with Tasha, but that didn't go well either. After their blowout fight, Tasha wasn't exactly eager to let her crash on the couch. Tasha made it clear she didn't want to be involved in the mess anymore, and letting Mia stay with her would only make things worse. Chloe told me Mia had reached out to a few other friends, but most of them had already distanced themselves. Rachel ignored her calls, and the others didn't want to risk being caught in the crossfire. By the end of the week, Mia was basically couch surfing wherever she could find a temporary place to stay. The financial fallout hit her even harder. Mia had a cushy office job at a company her dad had helped her get into. Henry pulled some strings to get her in the door, and she'd been coasting ever since. But after her parents kicked her out, Henry made it clear he wasn't going to protect her anymore. From what I heard, Mia's manager wasn't thrilled with her work ethic to begin with. She'd already been warned about showing up late and slacking off on projects. Once her personal drama started leaking into the workplace, thanks to whispers from mutual acquaintances, the company decided she wasn't worth the trouble. She was let go under the guise of downsizing. I'll admit, when Chloe told me about Mia losing her job, I felt a little vindicated. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it was another example of her actions catching up with her. For years, she'd coasted through life, relying on other people to clean up her messes. Now she had no safety net. I heard through the grapevine that Mia tried to reach out to Janet and Henry again after losing her job. She showed up at their house crying and begging to come back, saying she didn't have anywhere else to go. But they didn't cave. By this point, Mia was completely out of options. She didn't have a job, a place to stay, or any friends willing to help her. The texts and calls from her were getting more desperate. "Ryan, please talk to me. I have no one else. I'm sorry for everything. I lost my job, my home, everything. I know I messed up. Please give me another chance. I'll do anything to fix this. Just tell me what you want." I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't about to let her guilt me into giving her another chance. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. One of our mutual friends, Eric, gave me an update about a week later. Apparently, Mia had reached out to him, hoping he'd let her stay with him for a while. Eric, being the no-nonsense guy he is, shut her down immediately. "She's in a bad way, man," he told me. "She was crying on the phone, saying she didn't know what to do. But I told her straight up, this isn't my problem." Eric wasn't being heartless. He just wasn't about to let her manipulate him the way she'd tried to manipulate me. Eventually, Chloe told me Mia ended up renting a room in a rundown apartment on the other side of town. She used the last of her savings to pay for the first month's rent, but beyond that, she was scrambling to make ends meet. She picked up a part-time gig at a coffee shop, but it wasn't enough to cover her expenses. "She's barely hanging on," Chloe said. "I don't think she's ever been this low." The part that surprised me the most was how quickly everyone turned their backs on her. For years, Mia had been the center of her friend group, the one who always planned the parties and brought people together. But now that she was the one in trouble, no one wanted to help her. Tasha washed her hands of Mia entirely, saying, "She's not my responsibility anymore." Rachel cut ties completely, saying she couldn't deal with the drama. Even Chloe, who had tried to stay neutral, eventually stopped talking to her. Mia had burned every bridge she had, and now she was stuck trying to rebuild her life from scratch. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little satisfaction watching her unravel. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it proved a point. Actions have consequences. Mia had spent years relying on other people to bail her out, but now she was finally facing the reality of her choices. As for me, I was moving on. Every day felt like a step closer to leaving all the drama behind. Mia was on her own now, and honestly, that's exactly where she needed to be. This story is titled, "My Parents Didn't Help Me with My Studies, so they bought a new car for $55,000 for my sister. And then, when I became successful, they came to lend money for her wedding, after they didn't help me." Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, big news! I've launched a new Reddit channel. This time, the background isn't Minecraft. It's Subway Surfers in a Christmas theme to match the season. Check it out, subscribe, and join the fun. Links in the description. See you there. Now let's start the video. I thought my family was alright. Not great, not terrible. Just average, you know? Growing up, my parents, Linda and Mark, didn't spoil us, but they weren't cruel either. Or at least, that's what I thought. Things were manageable. We had food on the table, clothes that fit, and the occasional vacation to somewhere like a local lake or campground. Nothing fancy, but enough to feel like we were doing okay. All that changed when I turned 18 and got into med school. I'd worked my ass off in high school to make this happen, sacrificing weekends and summer breaks to study, volunteer, and do everything they said would look good on a med school application. And it paid off. I got into a solid program. And yeah, I was stoked. I remember sitting at the dinner table that night, the acceptance letter in my hand. "I got in," I said, unable to keep the grin off my face. "I just need some help with tuition. I'll pay you guys back once I'm working. Promise." Dad didn't even look up from his plate. He just kept cutting his meat like I hadn't said anything at all. Mom gave me one of her tired looks, the kind she usually reserved for when I asked for gas money or an extra $10 for school supplies. "We can't help you, Eric," Dad finally said. "Money's tight right now." I blinked. Tight? I knew we weren't swimming in cash, but tight. "You helped Ashley last year with her tuition," I pointed out. My voice wasn't even angry, just confused. "What changed?" Mom didn't even hesitate. "Your sister needed help," she said simply, "and we have other priorities now." Ashley, my older sister, sat across the table scrolling on her phone, acting like she wasn't part of this conversation. She didn't even glance up, and for some reason, that made me feel worse. That night, I tried to brush it off. I told myself they were stressed, that maybe they really were struggling. But 2 days later, Dad came home with a brand new Jeep Grand Cherokee. Not for him, for Ashley. When I say brand new, I mean brand new. Leather seats, fancy tech, the whole deal. And I heard Dad telling a neighbor it cost $55,000. I stared at it parked in the driveway like it was mocking me. I couldn't believe it. They had other priorities, huh? Apparently, those priorities included making sure Ashley had a flashy car to cruise around town. Meanwhile, I was supposed to figure out how to pay for med school on my own. That night, I sat in my room staring at my acceptance letter. The excitement I'd felt just days earlier was gone, replaced by this sinking feeling in my chest. I thought about giving up on med school entirely. It wasn't like I could afford it, and clearly, my family wasn't going to help. But then I thought, screw it. If they weren't going to invest in me, I'd just have to invest in myself. The next morning, I started looking for jobs. Anything that would pay me enough to save for tuition. I applied everywhere. Restaurants, retail, delivery services. It was depressing, honestly. After spending years working toward med school, I was now competing for minimum wage jobs. I finally landed a position at a warehouse. That night, I collapsed onto my bed, too tired to even eat. But despite the exhaustion, there was this stubborn part of me that felt proud. I was doing it. I was taking care of myself, even if it sucked. What got under my skin was the way my parents acted like Ashley's success was a given, while I was just some afterthought. "You're learning the value of hard work," Dad said one evening when I came home covered in dust and sweat. "Hard work?" I wanted to yell. I was breaking my back every day while Ashley was handed everything on a silver platter. But I didn't say anything. What was the point? One night, as I sat in my room doing homework, I heard Dad talking on the phone in the other room. He was bragging about Ashley's Jeep to someone, going on about how she deserved it for being so responsible. I slammed my textbook shut and left the house for a walk, needing to cool down. Responsible? Ashley didn't even have a part-time job. She was coasting through life, and they were rewarding her for it. Meanwhile, I was out here working like crazy, and all I got was silence. But that silence taught me something. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their money either. All I needed was to keep my head down and get through this. Looking back, that realization was the turning point. It didn't make things easier, but it gave me a sense of purpose. If they didn't think I was worth it, fine. I'd prove them wrong. Getting into med school felt like the big win I'd been chasing for years. But the reality of how I'd get there hit me like a brick the minute I stepped into the warehouse for my first full shift. Let me tell you, if you've never spent 10 hours lugging boxes, sweating through your clothes, and dodging forklifts, you're not missing much. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't even decent, but it was a job, and it paid enough for me to scrape by while saving for school. The warehouse was this huge, loud space filled with rows of shelving that seemed to stretch forever. The air always felt thick with dust, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed nonstop. The work was grueling. I spent most of my day unloading delivery trucks and stacking boxes that sometimes weighed more than I did. My first week, I thought my arms were going to fall off. By the end of each shift, my hands were raw, my legs felt like jelly, and my back. Don't even get me started on my back. It was the kind of pain that didn't go away after a hot shower or a night's sleep. It just stayed, like a constant reminder of how hard I was pushing myself. And the warehouse wasn't just physically draining, it was mentally exhausting too. The managers barked orders all day, always watching, ready to pounce if you were even a little slow. I'd hear stuff like, "Pick up the pace, Eric. Those boxes aren't going to move themselves," on repeat. Some days I wondered if they even saw us as people or just machines they could yell at to get more work done. Still, I didn't complain. I couldn't. I needed that paycheck to cover my tuition and basic expenses. Complaining wouldn't make the boxes any lighter or the shifts any shorter. What made it worse was going home after a long day with my shoes coated in dirt and my muscles screaming for a break, and seeing Ashley in her usual spot, lounging on the couch or scrolling on her phone in the kitchen, completely unbothered. Mom and Dad? They acted like everything was normal, like me busting my ass in a warehouse was just part of the natural order of things. "You're doing good, Eric," Dad said one evening, not even looking up from his TV. "Hard work builds character." Character. Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, Ashley was upstairs snapping selfies in designer clothes and talking about her weekend plans. It felt like a slap in the face every single day, but I didn't say anything. I'd learned that arguing with them never led anywhere. They'd just brush me off or find a way to twist things around. The routine started to feel like a prison. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., choke down some instant coffee, and head to the warehouse. I'd spend my day hauling boxes, trying to avoid injuries or getting chewed out by the supervisors. After work, I'd rush to community college for night classes, barely staying awake through lectures. By the time I got home, it was usually close to midnight. There wasn't time for anything else. No social life, no hobbies, no sleep, just work, school, repeat. Some days, I'd stand in the break room at the warehouse, staring at the old vending machine wondering how the hell this became my life. My coworkers were a mixed bag. Most of them were older guys who'd been there for years, and they had this weird mix of pity and amusement toward me. "Kid, you're wasting your time here," one of them said while we were unloading a truck together. "You should be in college or something, not breaking your back for peanuts." "I'm working my way there," I'd reply, wiping sweat from my face. They usually didn't have much to say after that. But it wasn't just the physical grind that wore me down. It was the mental exhaustion of constantly trying to juggle everything. I'd sit in class, trying to focus on the professor's lecture, but my mind would wander to my next shift or how I was going to afford textbooks for the next semester. Then, of course, there were the little reminders from my parents that they didn't really see what I was going through. One evening, after a particularly rough day at the warehouse, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "When are you going to start thinking about something more stable, Eric? Maybe business school? Or accounting? Med school is a big risk, you know." I stared at her, too tired to argue. "I'm already in pre-med, Mom. I've got it under control." She sighed like I just told her I was dropping out to become a street performer. "I just don't want you to regret this." Regret? The only thing I regretted was relying on them for support in the first place. What really pushed me over the edge, though, was the accident. I was in the middle of a shift, carrying a heavy box across the warehouse floor, when I stepped on a patch of spilled oil. My foot slipped, and I went down hard. The box landed on my ankle, twisting it in a way that made me scream out loud. I couldn't stand up, and no one rushed to help. The manager eventually wandered over, muttered something about watching where I'm going, and called someone to cover my shift. No ambulance, no concern, just a "you're slowing us down" attitude. I hobbled out of there and managed to get to a walk-in clinic on my own. The doctor told me I'd sprained my ankle pretty bad and would need to stay off it for a few weeks. That was hilarious because staying off it wasn't an option. When I called Mom to tell her what happened, hoping for maybe a little sympathy, she barely reacted. "That's too bad," she said, her tone flat. "By the way, Ashley's thinking about upgrading her car. Maybe you can help her find a good deal?" I hung up the phone without even saying goodbye. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I couldn't work, which meant no paycheck, and my savings took a massive hit just trying to cover rent and food. I tried to focus on school, but the stress of not knowing how I'd make ends meet was overwhelming. My parents didn't offer to help, of course. And Ashley? She didn't even notice. Looking back, that accident was a turning point for me. It was when I realized just how little I mattered to them. But instead of breaking me, it pushed me harder. If they didn't care, fine. I didn't need their help or approval. I just needed to keep going. And I did. By the time my ankle healed, I was barely hanging on. My savings were drained, my credit card was maxed out, and I was behind on rent. The sprain had put me out of work for weeks. And as much as I hated that warehouse job, losing it made me realize just how much I depended on those paychecks. I went back as soon as I could walk again. Limping into that dusty, noisy building felt like defeat. But what choice did I have? I needed the money, plain and simple. My first day back, one of the managers made some sarcastic comment about me taking a nice vacation. I didn't even reply. I just got back to work. Physically, I was weaker than before, but mentally, something had shifted. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I had this fire in me, this constant reminder that I couldn't stop. If I gave up now, I'd be stuck in that warehouse forever, just like some of the guys who'd been there for 20 years. Still, the grind was relentless. I'd go from 10-hour shifts to late-night studying sessions in my cramped apartment, surviving on instant noodles and caffeine pills. My social life was non-existent. Friends from high school would text me sometimes, asking if I wanted to hang out or grab a drink, but I always turned them down. "Can't," I'd say. "Work and school." They eventually stopped asking. Meanwhile, my family was as clueless as ever. I didn't bother telling them about my struggles because, honestly, what was the point? The few times I'd opened up to them in the past, it always ended with some condescending comment or a complete lack of interest. One night, after a particularly brutal shift, I got home to find a voicemail from Mom. "Hi, Eric. Just checking in. Oh, and Ashley's been looking at apartments downtown. She's so excited. It's going to be pricey, but she deserves it after everything she's accomplished." I deleted the message without listening to the rest. What had she accomplished exactly? Driving her fancy Jeep to yoga classes and brunch? Meanwhile, I was busting my ass every single day, and they couldn't care less. At work, I started noticing how some of the older guys moved, slow, stiff, like their bodies were barely holding up after years of abuse. It freaked me out. Was that going to be me if I didn't get out of here? I used that fear to push myself harder in school. I spent every spare second in the library, cramming for exams and working on assignments. My professors started noticing too. One of them pulled me aside after class one day. "Eric, you're doing great work. Have you thought about applying for scholarships?" I almost laughed. I've looked into it, I said. But most of them go to kids fresh out of high school or people with perfect GPAs. I don't really qualify. She nodded sympathetically. Well, if you need a recommendation, let me know. You're one of the hardest working students I've seen. That little bit of validation meant more than she probably realized. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. Things at home, though, stayed the same. Ashley got her downtown apartment, fully furnished, of course. Mom couldn't stop talking about how independent Ashley was, conveniently ignoring the fact that she was still living off their money. The rare times I went home for dinner, it was like stepping into another world. Ashley would talk about her weekend plans, dinners at expensive restaurants, trips to the spa, while I sat there quietly, too tired to contribute. You should take a break sometime, Eric, Mom said during one of those dinners. All that work isn't good for you. I couldn't even respond. The irony of her telling me to take a break while they funded Ashley's vacations was too much. But the silence wasn't just at home. It was everywhere. My phone rarely buzzed, my social media was dead, and I barely spoke to anyone outside of work or school. It was lonely, sure, but I didn't have the energy for anything else. Over the next few months, I slowly started to rebuild. My grades improved, and I managed to save up a little money, though it was nowhere near enough for med school. My life was far from perfect, but I was making progress, and that was enough to keep me going. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Dad. "Hey, Eric," he said, his tone casual. "How's school?" It caught me off guard. He never called just to check in. It's fine," I said cautiously. "Why?" "Well, your mom and I were talking, and we were wondering if you'd be able to help Ashley out with something." I clenched my jaw. Of course, this wasn't about me. It was never about me. "What does she need?" "She's thinking about getting some new furniture for her apartment," he said. "Maybe you could pitch in a little. You know, family helps family." I laughed bitterly. Family helps family? That's rich, coming from you. He paused, clearly not expecting that reaction. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've been working myself into the ground for years, with no help from anyone, especially not you. And now you want me to help Ashley buy furniture? Yeah, not happening. I hung up before he could respond. The silence that followed was deafening, but it felt right. After that call with Dad, something clicked in me. I wasn't going to keep bending over backward for people who didn't care whether I sank or swam. If they weren't going to lift me up, fine. I'd lift myself. It wasn't some grand declaration. It was more like a quiet decision to just stop giving energy to people who didn't deserve it. Work was brutal, as always. My ankle had healed, but I could still feel it twinge if I moved the wrong way. I couldn't afford to slow down, though. Every dollar I made went straight into my tuition fund or toward bills. No room for extras, no margin for error. The warehouse didn't get any easier. If anything, it felt harder after my injury. I didn't have the same stamina I used to, and my body felt older than it should. Some nights, I'd sit on the edge of my bed, just staring at my boots, wondering how I'd get up and do it all again the next day. But I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. Med school applications were coming up, and I had to keep my grades sharp if I wanted a shot. Between shifts at the warehouse and my pre-med classes, I was running on fumes. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Mom still called occasionally, but it was always about Ashley, how she was thriving in her new apartment, how proud they were of her for managing so much responsibility. Responsibility? I wanted to laugh every time I heard that. Ashley's biggest stress was deciding whether to get white or beige furniture for her living room. Meanwhile, I was out here working 2 jobs and barely scraping by. But I didn't say anything. I just kept my head down and focused on what I could control. One day at the warehouse, I had a conversation with one of the older guys, Paul. He'd been there for 15 years and looked every bit of it. Stooped shoulders, calloused hands, and a permanent limp from an old injury. "You're still in school, right?" he asked during a break, lighting a cigarette just outside the loading dock. "Yeah," I said, wiping sweat off my face. "Good," he said, taking a drag. "Get out of here while you can. This place will chew you up and spit you out. Don't be like me." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. But his words stuck with me. That week, I started doubling down on my studies. I'd wake up earlier to review notes before work and stay up later to finish assignments. It was exhausting, but I knew it was the only way out. Then came the car breakdown. My 15-year-old sedan, held together by duct tape and prayers, finally gave up on me. It happened in the worst way, too. On my way to a night class, I pulled over to the side of the road and stared at the smoking hood, wondering how the hell I was going to fix this. I called Dad, not because I expected help, but because I didn't know what else to do. "Car broke down," I said. "Any chance you can give me a hand?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Well, you know I'm not great with cars. Maybe Ashley can drive you to work for a while." I hung up. The idea of asking Ashley for anything made me want to gag. I ended up walking the last 2 miles to class that night, arriving drenched in sweat and late enough to miss half the lecture. I sat in the back, fuming, not just about the car, but about the fact that I couldn't even count on my own family for basic support. That weekend, I worked a few extra shifts to scrape together the cash for a cheap repair. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it got the car running again, and that was all I needed. What surprised me most during this time was how little I heard from my parents. After that last call with Dad, it was radio silence. No, how are you doing? No, do you need help? Just nothing. It was almost laughable. One night, while I was cramming for an exam, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. Hope you're doing okay, Eric. By the way, Ashley's thinking about a trip to Europe next summer. She's so excited. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. It wasn't even worth replying. Despite everything, I kept pushing forward. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about guys like Paul, trapped in the warehouse because they didn't have a way out. I thought about the nights I spent walking to class or eating ramen for the 5th time that week. And I thought about Ashley, coasting through life with her parents cheering her on, while I fought for every inch. It wasn't fair, but it fueled me. When I finally got my acceptance letter to med school, it felt surreal. After years of grinding, I was finally on the path I'd dreamed of since I was a kid. I sat in my tiny apartment, holding the letter in my hands, and let myself cry for the first time in years. But I didn't tell my parents. What was the point? They'd find a way to make it about Ashley, like they always did. Instead, I celebrated alone, knowing that this win was mine. I'd earned it, not with their help, but in spite of their indifference. And that felt better than anything they could have said or done. I hadn't heard much from my parents after getting into med school. They didn't call to congratulate me, which wasn't surprising, and I didn't bother sharing the news. I had learned the hard way that my victories didn't mean much to them, unless Ashley could somehow get a share of the spotlight. So imagine my surprise when Mom called one evening. I was in the middle of reviewing for an upcoming anatomy exam, trying to memorize terms that sounded like a foreign language, when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. Hi, Eric, how are you? We've missed you so much, she started, her voice sugary sweet, like she was about to ask for a favor. I leaned back in my chair, already bracing myself. What's up, Mom? Well, she said, dragging out the word, Ashley's wedding is coming up, and we've hit a little financial snag. Things are just so expensive these days, and we were hoping you could pitch in a bit. You know, family helping family. I actually laughed, like I couldn't help it. You want me to help pay for Ashley's wedding? Yes, she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. It's her big day, Eric. It's important to her. The absurdity of it all hit me at once. Mom, you wouldn't even help me pay for med school, but now you want me to fork over money for Ashley's wedding? Do you hear how insane that sounds? She sighed, like I was being difficult. It's not about that. You're doing well now, and Ashley's always been there for you. I cut her off. Always been there for me? When? Please, tell me when she's ever been there for me. There was silence on the other end, followed by her trying to guilt trip me. Eric, this is about family. We all have to make sacrifices for each other. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. Funny how the sacrifices always seem to come from me. The answer's no, Mom. I'm not helping. Her tone shifted immediately. I didn't realize you were so selfish. That was it. I hung up. I wasn't about to sit there and let her twist this into me being the bad guy. A week later, Ashley called me herself. I stared at her name on the screen for a few seconds before deciding to pick up. Better to deal with it directly than let this drag out. Hey, Eric, she said, her voice overly sweet. Mom told me you're not helping with the wedding. What's going on? I couldn't help but laugh again. What's going on? Ashley, are you serious? You've been handed everything your whole life, and now you expect me to throw in money for your big day? No way. Her tone shifted immediately. Look, I get that things haven't always been fair, but this is different. This is my wedding. It's about family. I snapped. Family? Don't even start. Where was family when I was busting my ass to pay for school? Where was family when I needed help? You've had everything handed to you, Ashley. Everything. Don't sit there and lecture me about family. She huffed, clearly annoyed. Maybe if you weren't so bitter, things could be different. That one stung, but I didn't let her see it. You know what, Ashley? You're right. I am bitter. Bitter because I've had to work for everything while you've coasted through life. But at least I can stand on my own 2 feet. Can you say the same? There was a long pause before she said, You're unbelievable, and hung up. I blocked her number right after that. I didn't need her drama in my life. For the next few weeks, I didn't hear from either of them, which was a relief. But then, one evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mom standing there, looking like she'd been crying. Great. Eric, can we talk? she asked. I let her in, mostly because I didn't want her causing a scene in front of my neighbors. She sat down on my couch and immediately started with the guilt tripping. You know, your sister isn't perfect, but she's still your sister. Family is supposed to support each other. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Mom, I've been supporting myself my whole life. Where was the family support when I needed it? She launched into the same tired excuses I'd heard 100 times. We were doing the best we could. Things were tight back then. Stop, I said, cutting her off. You weren't doing your best. You made choices. You chose to help Ashley and leave me to figure it out on my own. And I did. But don't come to me now, years later, asking for favors like nothing happened. She looked genuinely hurt for a moment, but then she said, I just don't understand how you can turn your back on your own sister. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not turning my back on her. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. And honestly, it's about time someone in this family did. She didn't stay much longer after that. When she left, I felt a mix of emotion, relief that I stood my ground, but also anger that she still didn't get it. A few weeks later, I saw a picture of Ashley's wedding on social media. It was everything you'd expect. Extravagant venue, designer dress, the whole 9 yards. The caption read, "Wish you could have been there, Eric. Still love you, though." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. For once, I felt like I was finally putting myself first, and it felt damn good. After Ashley's wedding came and went, the silence from my family was deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence where you wonder if something's wrong. It was the kind where you finally feel some peace. No texts, no calls, no random guilt trips disguised as checking in. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking around with a weight on my chest. I wasn't mad about missing the wedding. Honestly, I'd barely thought about it. From the pictures I saw online, it looked like the typical over-the-top event you'd expect from Ashley. Everything was flashy and curated for Instagram, right down to the choreographed first dance. About a month later, though, my phone rang, and it was Dad. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hey, I said, trying to keep it short. Hey, Eric, he started, his tone quieter than usual. I just wanted to say, I wish things hadn't gone this way. We didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. I waited. I could tell there was more coming. But, he continued, your sister needed us, and we did what we thought was best at the time. There it was, the same excuse I'd heard 1,000 times. I sighed, not even angry anymore, just exhausted. Dad, I don't hate you, or Mom, or even Ashley, but I can't pretend like nothing happened. You made your choices, and I've made mine. He was quiet for a few seconds, then said, I get it. I really do. I just hope one day we can all be close again. Maybe, I replied. But it's going to take time. We hung up after that, and I realized something. For the first time, I didn't feel like I needed their approval. I wasn't chasing their validation anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I'd built my life without them, and I was proud of that. Over the next few months, I focused on med school. It wasn't easy, it never had been, but it felt different now. I wasn't carrying the same bitterness I used to. I was just doing my thing, working hard, and letting everything else fall away. Ashley didn't reach out again after the wedding, and I was fine with that. Every now and then, I'd see her posts pop up on social media, pictures from some tropical vacation or a new designer bag she'd just bought. It didn't sting the way it used to. Instead, it felt more like watching a stranger's life unfold. Mom eventually tried to reach out too, but her attempts were half-hearted. A random text here or there, usually something like, hope you're doing well, or we miss you. I'd reply with a polite, thanks, I'm good. But that was the extent of it. I wasn't ready to reopen those doors, and I wasn't sure if I ever would be. The truth is, I didn't need their involvement in my life to feel whole anymore. I had my own goals, my own successes, and my own sense of self-worth. Sure, it hurt that my family had let me down so many times, but I wasn't going to let that define me. One day, while I was on a quick lunch break, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ashley. The message read, Hey, Eric. I know things have been weird, but I just want you to know I'm proud of everything you've accomplished. Hope we can talk someday. I stared at the message for a while, unsure how to feel. Was she being genuine? Or was this another attempt to smooth things over without actually addressing the problem? In the end, I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't feel like it was my responsibility to fix what they'd broken. If she really wanted to reconnect, she'd have to show it through actions, not just words. A few weeks later, I was at a coffee shop near campus, reviewing notes for an upcoming test, when I ran into one of my old co-workers from the warehouse, Paul, the guy who'd told me not to get stuck there like he had. Eric, he said, squinting at me like he couldn't believe it. That you? Hey, Paul, I said, smiling. He pulled up a chair and we started catching up. I told him about med school, and he told me he'd finally retired from the warehouse. Couldn't do it anymore, he said, shaking his head. My back's shot, and my knees are worse. I felt a pang of sadness for him, but also gratitude for the path I'd taken. You were right, I said, about getting out while I could. I'm glad I listened. He grinned. Good. You deserve better than that place, kid. As I walked home that evening, I thought about how far I'd come, from the kid struggling to keep up with shifts and night classes, to someone who was finally living his dream. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been fair, but I'd made it. And for the first time, I realized I didn't just survive despite my family's neglect. I thrived because I refused to let it hold me back. That was my victory, and it was enough. This story is titled, My Girlfriend Used Our Anniversary Trip to Meet Up with Her Ex, so I canceled her return ticket. Now she is desperate to reconcile. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. So, I'm 30 male, and I've been working as a financial analyst in Manhattan for about 8 years now. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays well, and I've always been the kind of guy who enjoys treating the people I care about. For the past 3 years, I was dating Vanessa. She's 28, gorgeous, and had this whole vibe of being effortlessly cool and trendy. When we first met, she told me she was working on becoming a fashion influencer, and I was honestly impressed by her ambition. When we started dating, her following on Instagram was tiny, barely over 3,000. She posted a mix of selfies, random outfit shots, and a lot of quotes about chasing dreams. She'd talk about how one day she'd get noticed and work with big brands, but she also made it clear she was struggling to get her foot in the door. I liked her energy, though. She had this way of talking about her goals that made you want to root for her. And well, I wanted to help. I wasn't trying to be some savior or anything, but I figured if I had the means to make her life easier, why not? At first, it was little things, taking her out for nice dinners, helping her pick out clothes for her posts, or surprising her with gifts like accessories she mentioned wanting but couldn't afford. She'd always get so excited, saying things like, "Oh my God, this is perfect for a shoot." Watching her light up like that felt good. But as time went on, those little things started turning into bigger things. She wanted to upgrade her wardrobe to include designer pieces. If I want brands to notice me, I have to show I understand the aesthetic, she'd say. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. So, I started buying her the occasional luxury bag or outfit. Then it became more than occasional. It didn't stop there. Soon, she wanted better pictures for her feed, not just the ones I was taking on my phone when we were out. Professionals will make a huge difference, she said. So I paid for a few photo sessions with local photographers. Then she needed to travel because influencers who work with brands are always at cool locations. So I covered a couple of trips. I told myself it was just an investment in her future. And ours, by extension. At least that's what I thought at the time. To be fair, Vanessa wasn't entirely ungrateful. She'd always thank me with a big smile or post something sweet on Instagram about how lucky she was to have someone who believed in her. But after a while, the gratitude started to feel routine. Like she'd just check it off the list before moving on to whatever she wanted next. And honestly, I didn't really mind at first. I cared about her, and I wanted her to succeed. But over time, it became clear she wasn't just relying on me, she was expecting it. The turning point for me came during a trip to LA about a year ago. I had paid for her flight and hotel because she was convinced this trip was going to be the one, where she'd network with people who could launch her career. Instead, she spent the entire time taking selfies, shopping, and lounging by the pool. No networking, no meetings, no effort to actually make connection. When I gently brought it up, she brushed me off, saying, "You don't understand how this works. It's about building an image first." It was the first time I thought, am I being used? But I pushed the thought aside because, honestly, I am financially safe. I figured she was just trying to find her way and needed time to figure things out. Besides, we were still happy together, or so I thought. Fast forward to our 3rd anniversary. I wanted to make it special, something we'd both remember. So, I planned a luxury getaway to Montauk. I went all out, booked a gorgeous suite with ocean views, reserved tables at the best restaurants, and even planned a couple of activities I thought she'd enjoy, like a sunset cruise. When I showed her the plans, I expected her to be over the moon, but her reaction wasn't what I thought it would be. "Montauk is nice," she said, hesitating, "but there's this other coastal town I've been dying to visit. It's smaller, more unique. I've heard great things about the restaurants and shops there." Her tone was sweet, but something about it felt off. I mean, who turns their nose up at Montauk? I asked her why she wanted to go there specifically, and she just said, "I think it'll be more romantic. Plus, it's somewhere we haven't been before. She was so insistent, and I didn't want to ruin the moment by arguing, so I caved. After all, it wasn't like I was married to the idea of Montauk. If it made her happy, I was happy. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Looking back, that was the first real warning sign. Vanessa wasn't just being particular about where we went. She had an agenda. I just didn't realize it yet. The trip started out great. On the surface, at least. We arrived at this cute coastal town Vanessa had picked, and she seemed thrilled. As soon as we checked into the hotel, she was all over the place, snapping photos of the room, the view, even the complimentary chocolates on the pillow. She kept saying, "This is going to get so many likes," and I'd laugh along, not realizing how much that summed up her priorities. The first day was pretty chill. We went to the beach, had some great seafood for lunch, and explored a couple of local shops. Vanessa was glowing, and I couldn't help but feel like maybe I'd done the right thing by letting her pick the destination. I mean, her happiness was worth it, right? That's what I kept telling myself. But by dinner, things started to feel a little off. We were sitting at this cozy little Italian place, and out of nowhere, Vanessa brought up marriage. "You know," she started, twirling her fork around her pasta, "we've been together for 3 years now. That's a long time." I nodded, not thinking much of it. "Yeah, it has been," I said, smiling. "It feels like it's flown by." She smiled back, but in this way that felt a little too calculated. "Don't you think it's time we start talking about the future? About, settling down?" I froze for a second because this wasn't a conversation I was expecting on this trip. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't against the idea of marriage, but we'd never seriously talked about it before, and her timing felt strange. "I mean, it's definitely something to think about," I replied cautiously. "But are you sure this is something you want to bring up now?" Vanessa laughed lightly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Why not? It's a romantic trip. Perfect time to talk about what's next for us." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Fair enough. What exactly do you mean by what's next?" She leaned in, her tone shifting. "Well, it just makes sense to start planning for marriage, doesn't it? It's the next step. And if we got married, things like finances would be so much easier. We'd share everything. No more keeping things separate." There it was. I couldn't put my finger on why, but the way she said it made my stomach twist. It wasn't about love or commitment. It was about money. I took a sip of water, trying to buy time to process what she was saying. "I mean, sharing finances is a big step," I said. "But honestly, I think if marriage were on the table, I'd probably want to talk about a prenup first, just to make sure we're both protected." Vanessa's face changed instantly. She put her fork down and stared at me like I'd just insulted her entire family. "A prenup?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "Why would you even think about something like that?" Her reaction caught me off guard. "It's not about mistrust," I said quickly, trying to smooth things over. "It's just a practical step. It protects both people, you know?" She laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh I was used to from her. It was cold, dismissive. "Wow, I didn't realize you thought I'd try to take advantage of you." "That's not what I said," I replied, feeling a little defensive. "I just think it's smart to have everything clear from the beginning. It doesn't mean I don't trust you." The next day, things were tense. Vanessa acted like nothing was wrong, at least on the surface. She posted pictures of her breakfast on Instagram with captions about vacation bliss, and talked about what she wanted to do that day. But there was this underlying frostiness in the way she interacted with me. She wasn't outright rude or mean, but she wasn't as affectionate as she usually was. It was like she was punishing me for the prenup conversation without actually saying anything. Still, I tried to shake it off. I figured maybe she just needed some space to process. Relationships have bumps, right? No big deal. I decided to focus on making the day fun and relaxed. We spent the morning wandering around the town, stopping in little boutiques and taking in the sights. Vanessa seemed to warm up a bit, but every now and then she'd drop a comment that made me pause. "This town is so charming," she said at one point. "It's the kind of place I'd love to come back to, maybe with someone who sees the value in it." I blinked. "What does that mean?" She waved me off with a laugh. "Nothing. I'm just saying it's romantic, that's all." Little remarks like that kept popping up throughout the day. I told myself I was overthinking things, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the comments or the lingering tension from dinner. It was her overall vibe. She seemed distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just casual talk for her. She wasn't pushing for marriage because she was in love. She was pushing for it because she saw it as a way to lock in access to my life, my finances, and everything else that came with being with me. By the time we went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I thought I knew wasn't the same person sitting next to me. The third morning of the trip started like any other. Vanessa was scrolling on her phone while lying in bed, completely absorbed in whatever influencer content she was consuming. I got up and ordered room service for breakfast, figuring we'd have a relaxing morning before heading out to explore more of the town. While we were eating, she suddenly perked up. "Oh my God," she said, showing me her phone. "There's this bag shop downtown that's like iconic. They only carry super exclusive pieces. It's the kind of place I'd never get to shop at back home." I nodded, mid-bite of my toast. "Sounds cool. Want me to go with you?" Vanessa shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. No, you don't have to. I know shopping isn't really your thing. Besides, it's probably going to take me forever to decide what I want, and I don't want you to be bored. That struck me as odd. We'd been doing everything together on this trip. Why suddenly the need for alone time? But I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. "All right," I said casually. "Just let me know if you need anything." She smiled sweetly. "You're the best," she said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. "I'll probably just be gone an hour or two." An hour or two turned into 4. At first, I didn't think much of it. Vanessa could be indecisive when it came to shopping, especially for big purchases. But as the hours ticked by, I started to feel uneasy. I hadn't gotten a single text or call from her, which was unusual. Vanessa was the kind of person who updated me on everything. Whether she found a cute cafe or tried on a dress she loved, I always got a running commentary. Today? Silence. I decided to check our shared credit card to see if she'd made any purchases. Nothing. No charges from the bag shop, no charges from anywhere. That didn't make sense. If she'd been shopping for hours, surely something would have shown up. My gut told me something was off, so I grabbed my jacket and headed out. I wandered downtown for a bit, checking out the shops and keeping an eye out for Vanessa. Eventually, I found myself near the marina, where the town's boardwalk ended in a quiet, scenic area with benches overlooking the water. That's when I saw her. She wasn't alone. Vanessa was sitting on a bench with a man I immediately recognized. Ryan, her ex-boyfriend. He'd popped up in a few of her old Instagram posts when we first started dating, but she'd assured me they were long over. They were sitting close. Too close. Vanessa was laughing at something Ryan had said, her hand resting casually on his arm. He leaned in, his body language comfortable and intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. I stayed where I was, hidden behind a nearby kiosk selling ice cream, and tried to get a handle on my emotions. Part of me wanted to march over there and demand an explanation, but the other part of me told me to wait and watch. That's when I caught bits of their conversation. "You really convinced him to come here?" Ryan asked, smirking. Vanessa laughed, a sound that suddenly grated on me. "Of course. I told him this town was more romantic and sweet-talked him a little. He bought it, no questions asked." Ryan grinned. "Well, it worked. I missed you." "I missed you too," Vanessa said, placing a hand on his knee. "Sneaking around has been exhausting." "Soon," Ryan said, leaning closer. "We'll figure it out. Just play along for now. You're too good at this." They laughed again, completely unaware of my presence. My hands were shaking with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. Pulling out my phone, I snapped a few pictures of them. If Vanessa was going to lie to my face, I needed proof. I walked away, my mind racing. This wasn't just some innocent meetup with an old friend. This was a full-blown secret affair. Vanessa hadn't picked this town for its romantic charm or unique shops. She'd picked it because it was the perfect cover to see Ryan, and I'd been stupid enough to go along with it. When I got back to the hotel, I tried to collect my thoughts. Part of me wanted to confront her the second she walked through the door, but another part of me wanted to wait. If she was bold enough to pull this off on a trip I planned and paid for, she'd have no problem lying to my face. I needed to see how far she'd go. Vanessa finally returned a couple of hours later, carrying a shopping bag from the luxury bag shop she'd mentioned earlier. "Hey," she said brightly, as if nothing was wrong. "I found the most perfect bag. You're going to love it." I forced a smile, keeping my tone neutral. "Looks like you had a good time. How much was it?" "Oh, I used cash," she said quickly, avoiding eye contact. That was an obvious lie. Vanessa never carried cash, and I'd already checked the credit card. There were no charges from the bag shop. Ryan must have paid for the bag. The thought made my stomach churn, but I kept my composure. "And the marina?" I asked casually. Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "What marina?" "Oh, I didn't go near the water. I was at the bag shop the whole time." I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Got it. Sounds like a productive day." She beamed, completely oblivious to the edge in my voice. "It was. Thanks for letting me do my thing. I can't wait to show you the bag." I didn't say much after that. Vanessa went about her evening as if nothing had happened, showing me the bag and talking about what she wanted to do the next day. I listened, nodding at the right moments, but inside I was seething. The woman I thought I loved had not only betrayed me, but had the audacity to use my money and my trust to pull it off. By the time she fell asleep, I'd already started planning how I was going to handle this. Vanessa thought she was in control, but she was about to find out just how wrong she was. That night, I kept replaying everything I'd seen and heard earlier at the marina. Vanessa's laugh, the way she leaned into Ryan, their disgusting little inside jokes about how clueless I was, it all kept looping in my head. The betrayal was bad enough, but the fact that she thought I was stupid enough to fall for it, that made it so much worse. When I finally dragged myself out of bed in the morning, Vanessa was already up. She was lounging in one of the hotel's fluffy robes, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up and gave me this bright, innocent smile like nothing had happened. "Morning, babe. Did you sleep okay?" I wanted to call her out right then and there, but I didn't. Not yet. "Yeah, I guess," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "What about you?" "Like a baby," she said, stretching dramatically. I needed that. Yesterday was exhausting. I nodded and poured myself some coffee, pretending to focus on my cup while she rambled on about how much she loved the hotel. "I was thinking," she said, flipping her phone around to show me a picture of a local restaurant. "We could grab lunch here today. It's super cute, and I heard the food is amazing." "Sure," I said, barely looking at the screen. My mind was already elsewhere. I needed to test her, to see how deep her lies would go. "So, what did you end up doing yesterday?" I asked casually, sitting down across from her. "You were gone for a while." Vanessa didn't even flinch. "Oh, just shopping," she said, waving a hand. "That bag shop was incredible. I spent forever deciding which one to get." She was so smooth, so confident in her lies. It was almost impressive, really. But I wasn't done. "Interesting," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I thought I saw you near the marina yesterday." Her smile faltered, just a bit. "The marina? Oh no, that wasn't me. I didn't go anywhere near the water." "Must have been someone else then," I said with a shrug, sipping my coffee. I could feel her watching me, trying to gauge if I was onto her. I kept my expression neutral, giving nothing away. Let her squirm. When it was time for lunch, we headed to the restaurant she'd picked out. Vanessa immediately started taking pictures of the table, the menu, and even her drink when it arrived. "This is perfect," she said, angling her phone just right. "My followers are going to love it." "Looks great," I said, barely paying attention. I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan and how he'd probably paid for her stupid bag. I wanted to ask her outright, wanted to see her squirm, but I held back. I needed to be smart about this. Confronting her in public wouldn't get me the answers I needed. When the food came, Vanessa barely touched hers. She was too busy snapping photos and scrolling through her phone. "You're so quiet," she said at one point, glancing up at me. "What's on your mind?" "Just tired, I guess," I said. "Didn't sleep great." She gave me a sympathetic smile. "Ah, poor baby. We'll take it easy this afternoon, okay? Maybe do a little shopping together." The audacity of this woman. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Sounds good." Eventually, we ended up at a boutique selling handmade jewelry. Vanessa picked up a necklace and held it up to her neck, turning to me with a playful smile. "What do you think? Would this look good in my next post?" "It's nice," I said, barely looking at it. She pouted. "Just nice? Come on, babe. You're supposed to hype me up." I forced a laugh. "All right, it's gorgeous. Happy?" "Much better," she said, grinning. Then, as casually as if she were asking about the weather, she brought up marriage again. The sheer nerve of this woman. She'd been sneaking around with her ex, lying to my face, and now she was talking about marriage? I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. "I mean, it's something to think about," I said carefully. "But I don't think we need to rush into anything." Vanessa didn't look pleased with that answer, but she didn't push. "I guess," she said, her tone clipped. "But eventually, right?" "Eventually," I said, hoping that would end the conversation. The morning of our departure started early. I slipped out of bed quietly and grabbed my phone, checking the photos I'd taken at the marina. Every time I looked at them, I felt a mix of anger and satisfaction. Anger because of what she'd done, and satisfaction because I had the proof I needed to finally end this farce of a relationship. She thought she'd played me, but the game was about to change. I started packing my things, careful not to make too much noise. Vanessa didn't stir. Of course, she didn't. This was someone who could sleep through a thunderstorm. Once my suitcase was ready, I took one last look at her. I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts. Just a quiet, simmering rage. On my way out of the room, I stopped at the hotel's front desk. The clerk smiled politely as I handed her the key. "Checking out early?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Just me, though. My girlfriend will be staying a little longer." The clerk nodded, not questioning it. I paid the remaining balance on the room and left instructions to inform Vanessa that her stay was extended at her own expense. Once that was done, I opened my airline app and canceled her return ticket. It felt cold, but after everything she'd done, I didn't feel like making her life easier. By the time I got to the airport, my phone was already blowing up with texts from Vanessa. She must have woken up to find me gone, and the note I'd left on the nightstand. I'd kept it short and sweet. Enjoy your extended vacation. Say hi to Ryan for me. The messages started off confused. Vanessa, where are you? Did you go out for coffee or something? Then they shifted to panic. Vanessa, did you leave? What the hell is this note about? What do you mean extended vacation? Finally, they turned to anger. Vanessa, you canceled my ticket? Are you serious right now? You're being so dramatic. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I turned my phone on silent and boarded my flight. The whole time, I kept picturing Vanessa back at the hotel, realizing she was stuck in a town hours away from home with no ticket, and most likely, not enough money to book one on her own. She was entirely dependent on me financially, and she knew it. Without my support, her carefully curated influencer life would fall apart. When I landed back home, I turned my phone back on to an explosion of missed calls and texts. Vanessa had gone full cycle, pleading, angry, accusatory, and finally desperate. Vanessa, please, let's talk. This is insane. Vanessa, I didn't even do anything wrong. You're overreacting. Vanessa, I don't have enough money to get home. What am I supposed to do? Her last message was the one that made me laugh out loud. Vanessa, you're humiliating me. How do you think this is going to make me look? That was always her priority. How things looked. Not the fact that she'd been caught lying. Not the betrayal. Not even the fact that she'd been using me for years. No. Her biggest concern was her image. Classic Vanessa. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the need to explain myself or give her any closure. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. The next few days were quiet. I blocked Vanessa's number and deleted her from all my social media. A few mutual friends reached out, asking what had happened. Apparently, Vanessa had already started spinning her version of the story, making it sound like I'd abandoned her out of nowhere. But when I forwarded them the pictures of her and Ryan at the marina, the truth spoke for itself. I can't believe she did that, one friend said. That's so low. She always seemed kind of off to me, another admitted. You're better off without her. Better off. That phrase stuck with me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally focus on myself without someone draining my energy and resources. Vanessa, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. I heard through the grapevine that she managed to get home eventually, though I didn't care enough to find out how. Without my financial support, her influencer dreams started to crumble. She couldn't afford the luxury lifestyle her followers expected, and her engagement tanked. A week later, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door just enough to see her face, but not enough to invite her in. She looked terrible. Puffy eyes, messy hair, and none of the polished perfection she always flaunted online. Please, she said, her voice trembling. Just give me 5 minutes. I can explain everything. I stared at her for a moment, feeling nothing but indifference. I don't need an explanation, I said. You didn't make a mistake, Vanessa. You made a choice, and now you have to deal with the consequences. She started crying, but I didn't budge. I was stupid, she said, choking on her words. I wasn't thinking. I don't care about Ryan, I care about you. No, you care about what I can do for you, I said firmly, and I'm done. With that, I closed the door and locked it. Her muffled sobs faded as she walked away, and I felt lighter than I had in years. This was the ending she deserved, and I had no regrets. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages from friends. Vanessa had apparently started a full-blown pity campaign on Instagram, posting cryptic stories about being betrayed and starting over. One friend even sent me a screenshot of a post where she wrote, "Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest." I couldn't help but laugh. The audacity of this woman, trying to paint herself as the victim when she was the one sneaking around with her ex. I didn't feel the need to engage, though. Let her followers believe whatever story she was spinning. I had nothing to prove. That afternoon, I got a text from one of our mutual friends, Sarah. She'd always been a straight shooter, the kind of person who didn't buy into Vanessa's influencer act. "Hey," she wrote, "Vanessa's trying to make you look like the bad guy. But I told her I know what really happened. If you want me to say anything to anyone, let me know." I appreciated the gesture, but I didn't want to give Vanessa any more of my energy. "Thanks, but I'm good," I replied. "Let her dig her own grave." And dig she did. Over the next week, I started hearing more and more about how Vanessa's life was unraveling. Without me footing the bill for her clothes, trips, and professional photo shoots, her influencer persona started to crack. Her followers were used to seeing her in designer outfits, sipping lattes at chic cafes, and lounging in luxury hotels. Now she was stuck trying to fake that lifestyle on a budget, and it wasn't working. She posted a photo wearing the same dress as last week, Sarah texted me one day. People in the comments are starting to notice. Another friend sent me a link to one of Vanessa's Instagram stories, where she was talking about embracing minimalism and moving away from material things. It was hilarious considering this was the same woman who once told me she couldn't possibly wear the same outfit twice because it would ruin her aesthetic. The best part? Ryan, the guy she'd risked everything for, had ghosted her. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that he'd bailed as soon as Vanessa's financial situation became clear. He's not trying to play daddy to her, they said. She's on her own now. Good. She deserved it. The best decision I made, though, was rebooking the Montauk trip. The one I'd originally planned before Vanessa hijacked it. I went solo this time, and it was everything I wanted it to be. At one point, I checked Vanessa's account, but the posts were sporadic now. Blurry mirror selfies, random motivational quotes, and one sad attempt at a thrift haul video. Her followers had dropped significantly, and the comments were brutal. "Where's your boyfriend who used to spoil you?" one person wrote. "Fake influencer vibes," said another. It was a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Back in Manhattan, life continued to get better. I started going to therapy, which was something I'd been putting off for years. Talking to someone about everything that happened helped me process the anger and hurt I didn't even realize I was carrying. I learned a lot about myself, why I'd let someone like Vanessa into my life, why I ignored the red flags for so long, and how I could set better boundaries moving forward. The last I heard about Vanessa was from Sarah. Vanessa moved back in with her parents, and apparently she was trying to rebrand herself as a lifestyle coach. Unreal, Sarah texted. She's acting like she's some kind of self-help guru now. Can you believe this? I laughed, shaking my head. Let her have it. I'm done caring. And that's it. Vanessa got what was coming to her, and I got my life back. Let me know what you think, Reddit. Ever had to deal with someone like this?